Hi there and welcome to this video on local dodging and burning. If you are here via my book, The Dramatic Portrait, welcome. If you are not, the link is down below. As part of The Dramatic Portrait, the book covers several parts of the post-production process, but this one is probably one of the hardest to translate into pages. And so we have this video component to help guide you along this process, which may seem a little bit confusing at first. Local dodging and burning, or corrective dodging and burning, sets out to either correct or fix certain little tonal or textural inconsistencies on skin. Now, we're not going to get into the threshold, the amount, how much you should use this or how little. Know that this is largely a matter of personal taste, and you're going to have to apply your own aesthetics based on what you think looks good. Now, also remember that there are a lot of different methods that you can go about to achieve this effect. We're talking you can use a 50% gray layer and dodge and burn. You can use curve adjustment layers to brighten and darken. At the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter as much of those techniques which one you end up going with, just that the end result kind of gets you to where you want to be, which is the idea that we're lightening and darkening certain areas of texture. Now, it is important to remember, at least for now, that you may not be good at local dodging and burning right off the bat. For me, it took probably half a dozen to 10 images before I really felt comfortable as far as what I was doing. And that's also because all of these images that you do are going to be different from image to image, but the way you approach it should be relatively similar. But know that you are going to encounter different decisions and creative decisions here and there. To kind of catch you up as far as what's actually been done to this image so far, we just have a little bit of skin cleanup. You can see we fixed a few little distractions down here, and I'm going to zoom in on the face a little bit more closely so that you can see what those changes actually are. And it's not much. That's the idea. Local dodging and burning can correct certain textural issues, but that's actually not its strong suit. It can be a little bit more difficult if you want to come in and correct certain textural issues through local dodging and burning. And so we kind of want to remove that before we even get to this point. And we've done that through the use of spot healing, the healing tool, and a little bit of clone stamp, so that we can fix some of these kind of small tonal distractions. Sorry, some of these small textural distractions, stray hairs, things like that. So she overall has pretty good skin. Now, this method can be applied to someone who has much more difficult skin to work on, but know that the ideas are still pretty much going to be the same. We're going to use it on her today, kind of coming in here and evening out this tonal area here, a little bit by the mouth, a little bit here between the eyes, this transition over here, and this shadow area over on this side of the cheek. And it's going to make a big difference. Now, again, there is a threshold. How much do you do? How much don't you do? This is largely a matter of personal taste, and you're actually only going to get there through experimentation. There are several actions out there when it comes to setting this up, and you can easily go find them for free. I think the beauty panel from Retouch Academy is excellent. I would recommend that as a way to set up a lot of your actions. I mentioned a little bit earlier that you can use a 50% gray, or you can use a couple of curve adjustment layers. Those are actually what we're going to use today. And again, it's largely not so much about the specific tools that you use, but it is about the end result. So just to kind of set us up, I'm going to create 2 curve adjustment layers, and I'm going to hit Command J on Mac or Control J on PC to duplicate that layer. And I'm going to make one called Darken, and I'm going to make one called Lighten. You can also call this Dodge and Burn. It doesn't actually matter. The Darken one, I'm going to bring it down to about here, and the lighten one, I'm going to bring it up about the opposite of the darken. Now, the image itself obviously doesn't particularly look good because both of these adjustments are applied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command I on the Mac or Control I on the PC to invert each of these masks, which is going to turn both of them to black masks. And that means when I start painting white on them, the effect shows up. Okay. Now what we're going to end up doing is this at a much smaller degree across the whole image. So, at the moment, we could just zoom in here and we could start getting to work. But we're going to set ourselves up for success by getting rid of some distractions to us visually, and largely that's color. Color is a distraction here that we don't need. We're only looking at tonal discrepancies. We're looking at lightness and darkness, and for that we don't need color. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a solid color 50% gray layer, and I'm going to change the blend mode to color. And the benefit of using a 50% gray layer set to color is that it's going to preserve tonal relationships between color. If you come in here and you just create a black and white adjustment layer, what's going to end up happening is you can have a huge variety of tonal differences between the detail in your image, and that's going to end up screwing you up when it comes to how much you need to dodge and burn. So 50% gray is going to keep that nice and consistent. Now that being said, we still can't quite see some of the tonal inconsistencies maybe necessarily as easily as we'd like to. They're definitely there. I can see a little bit on the cheek, and I can see a little bit over by the mouth, but I'm going to make it even easier for myself. And to do that, I'm going to create one more curve adjustment layer right on top, and I'm going to really darken it down. And I may even sometimes increase the contrast a little bit. And you can see how all of these tonal areas become a whole lot easier to see. Now the benefit of this is the fact that we're actually working underneath, and so all of these changes are going to make sense here. It's actually not going to be over exaggerated one way or the other, so that when we take both of these and we turn them off, everything is going to look perfectly normal. Now both of these can be turned off or deleted by the end of this. We actually don't need them. They are purely to help us at this stage. All right. Now, I would probably say, more often than not, I'm lightening rather than darkening. But that's a personal preference. Some people choose to darken rather than light. You'll also find that it can be different depending upon the image, depending upon what you're trying to do. I will always work on both. And generally how it works is when I start zooming in, if I'm looking at an area where it's mostly light and there are some dark issues, for example this, I'm going to lighten the dark stuff. It's path of least resistance. Whereas if I'm on a predominantly dark area and the issues are with some of the lighter tones, I'm going to lighten those tones. So you want to do basically as little work as possible here, because this is time consuming, this is tedious. Now the other part of this is you want to remember that although you are evening out and smoothing out some of these tonal transitions, you're not flattening the skin, because global dodging and burning, the way we may be familiar with, gives shape and dimension to objects, usually. But local dodging and burning is largely about doing the opposite. It's about zooming in to texture and tone and trying to flatten it out to give less of an appearance of dimension. And that's going to make it look a little bit smoother. So that's actually what we're fundamentally trying to do here. Now, when I zoom in, I'm going to kind of focus on generally, I'm going to start about right here. I just usually start kind of under the eye. Now, you get to use the space bar to move around. You may find that you like to work on certain parts of the image at a little bit of an angle, and the R button allows you to rotate. So you may find this is a little bit easier for you. You can also go up to reset view in the top left-hand corner, and you can change that around. Now B is going to bring up brush, and you want to make sure you're on both of these two layers. Now, when it comes to moving in between these two layers, some people will just want to click on and select those layers. There is also a shortcut to navigate up and down in between layers, and that's holding down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on the PC and using the left and right bracket tools. And those allow you, if you look over here, to navigate between your layers through the shortcuts. Now, some people will actually take their Wacom pen or their Stylus pen, and they will program the side buttons to the up and down between layers. I find that this can be incredibly useful. I use something called Palette, which is an external controller, and it's basically a couple of arcade buttons that allow me to move up and down in between layers. So that's something you're probably going to want to consider. Also, we are regularly going to be changing our brush size. So you really only want to be working on the side. You want to be working with a brush size that is about the size of the area you are currently working on. You don't want it to be bigger, and you don't really want it to be smaller. And one of the ways in which we can change brush size is by using the bracket keys, which allow us to holding them down. We can make them big or small, or hold down Control and Option, and you drag to the left and to the right, you can increase the size. Conversely, if you drag up and down, you can change the hardness as well. We're, for the most part, going to be using a very soft brush for this. For me, when it comes to this, I find that I like the bracket keys, but I also use something called a Griffin Powermate, which is just basically a little knob that I have programmed at a speed setting, and I can very quickly scroll through different sizes, and I find this to be very, very helpful. Some people will also use the wheel on their Wacom tablet. I find that's a little bit cumbersome because I situate my tablet over to the right-hand side, but it's largely a matter of personal preference. The Griffin Powermate comes in a Bluetooth version. It also comes in a wired version. Get whichever one you want. I use the wired version because I don't necessarily want to charge it up often. Now, I'm going to be on lighten and darken on both of these two here, setting my opacity at 100, and I'm going to set my flow between 1 and 3. I use a very, very low flow on this. Also, if you're looking at your brushes and you're using a stylus, the left two brushes are a perfectly round brush. These two are tapered. Tapered means it's going to come to a point, so we're going to use the far left brush, and it basically is going to look like this. And you can kind of see it's very, very subtle. There is going to be a lot of subtle work here, but we're going to move through the image and we're going to start to work on that. I will also say that although you can do this with a mouse, it is infinitely easier with a stylus, and I do recommend it. Now, you can also choose to start on brightness and move to darkness, or vice versa, or you can skip around. There is no right or wrong answer. Some people like to start big. For example, start with a bigger brush here and then work to the smaller details. Some people go the opposite route. It's really entirely up to you. Also, I find that you're generally going to want to at least be at around 100% for this. I probably say realistically 200 to 300% is going to be normal for you. This is precise work. You generally don't want to just start scribbling around willy-nilly and think that you're going to get good results. You're not. You have to really come in and you have to think about what you're doing, at least in the beginning, to get good results. This will become second nature in time, and it just kind of becomes something you move around the image and you fix distractions and You just wait for things to jump out at you. You'll also find that you'll become much quicker at this the more you do it. By, like I said, about half a dozen or so, you should be significantly quicker. But the first few times you do this, it's going to be real time consuming. Remember that it's okay to screw up. If you screw up, you can always paint the opposite color because this is a mask. You can paint black, or you can always hit undo. Never underestimate the power of the undo. You're also going to want to make sure that you constantly see this backed up. So you don't always want to look at it totally close. It's easy to lose sight of what you're doing. Kind of show you where we're at so far. And then what this is going to look like in color. You can see that we're already starting to fix some of those transitions a little bit. Now, some people also like to have a duplicate full screen version of this next to them. A cool way to do that is if you go to Window and Arrange up here at the top, and you go to New Window for your image, what you'll have is a secondary window. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Arrange and 2 up vertical. And what this is going to do is it's going to split my image into both sides. And then I can work on one, and you can frame it however you like. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to start to, I can see that I've still got a little bit of a rough edge transition here. I'm going to smooth this out a little bit. And I'm going to do that by darkening some of the light areas, and I'm going to lighten some of the darker areas. And that's going to help me create a little bit more of an even transition between both sides. It's also okay if you do end up over flattening the image a little bit. You can always dial it back, or through opacity, you can remask it out. You can also add a little bit more shape in global dodging and burning, which would probably come after this. The cool thing is if I want to jump over here and I wanted to adjust it at a little bit of a larger size, I could do that. And then I could jump back if I need to the other side, which is kind of cool. Now, I'm going to close this up because I actually prefer to work this way, but some people really do like that. Also, if you end up encountering some textural issues that maybe you missed the first time around, you can always create a layer on top of this and go back and fix that later. You don't really want to go underneath because what's going to end up happening is you've got these dodging and burnings on top of it, and you're just going to cause problems for yourself. It's not uncommon for me to spend the vast majority of my time on an image like this, on a beauty image, doing this particular step. This is easily the most time-consuming part of any retouch. Now, you might ask, why would I do this over something like a frequency separation? Well, frequency separation is definitely faster, and it definitely has their place. But you do find that frequency separation usually is a little bit more receptive. It's usually a little more receptive to making your images look a bit plasticky. So what I will do is, I use frequency separation when it's a time thing and I really have to do something quickly, or I'll actually use a combination of the two oftentimes. So I'll use a local dodging and burning on some of the more obvious areas, and then what I'll do is I'll use a frequency separation on areas that are shadow transitions, and I find that can be a much more effective way to use it. Also, if you want to ever come back and you want to retweak your curve layer to make certain things a little bit more visible, you can do that at any given time. But this part is pretty time consuming. It can take me anywhere from a half an hour to, depending upon the resolution of the image, a couple of hours, also depending upon the skin, depending upon a lot of different factors. You got to know that certain lighting is more susceptible to retouching. For example, if you're shooting hard light as opposed to a soft light, which tends to be a little bit more flattering, you kind of know that you're going to end up doing more retouching on the back end. There are also limits to this. There is only so far you can go in a few different places. But you will find that this is actually an incredibly versatile way to affect the appearance of skin in an image. And not every image is going to call for this level of retouching, obviously. But when you need to really do it thoroughly and do it correctly, this is great. So a lot of what you see here is I'm darkening the light stuff and lightening the dark stuff. And I find these buttons are very, very helpful for speed. Because this is such a time-consuming part of the process, I kind of always looked for little things that made my life easier, which is where the Powermate and the palette comes from. And that is not sponsored. I do not get anything from them. I just happen to think both things make my life a little bit easier. And the Powermate's a steal. It's only like $30 US. But that being said, don't get the Bluetooth. It's has to be charged all the time, and I find that to be a tremendous annoyance. You can come through and you can lighten necklines and stuff using this method. So if you find that, you want to come through here and lighten up these necklines, this is a very valuable tool. It's a matter of lightening and darkening because, you've got shadows and folds and things like that. Now, you also may find that all you have to do is enough based on how it's going to be seen. If this is never going to be looked at this closely, it's probably okay that you maybe do your dodging and burning from about here. It really depends on how your image is going to be presented. So what I'm going to kind of do here is even out this area a little bit. And some people are going to want to come in and fix every single bit of this texture. I think that's fine if you want to do that. I'd ultimately fix the makeup in a few different spots. I'm going to go ahead and start to fill it in a little bit here. It's not going to fix it completely, but it's going to make my life easier down the road. Now, some people may want to eliminate this little specular shine highlight. That's totally fine if that's your goal. I kind of don't mind it. Again, so much of retouching is personal taste and what you want out of it and what your threshold is. So don't feel like because you see something somewhere that you have to do it. It's whatever you want. Or if you're hired as a retoucher, whatever the person hiring you wants. And a light touch is clutch here. I mean, I'm at a 3% flow. I have a pretty light touch on the stylus. If you find that you're getting streaks and it's too heavy-handed, even if you're at a 1% flow, don't be afraid to come in and, turn the opacity down on top of it so that you really have a light touch. I find that especially if you're using lots of shadows in your work, these transitions can be a little bit problematic on skin. As the light kind of rakes across the skin, it tends to accentuate every single bit of texture, and that's not necessarily always ideal. I find that that's a place where I would usually do frequency separation, only because it's easier and quicker, and it's going to give me ultimately the same result, or close to it, I should say, close enough. But you can also get it through local dodging and burning, which is probably going to be better, but take a lot longer. And, for demonstration purposes, I'm not coming in here and doing this to absolute completion, but it should be enough that at least you get the idea about the purpose here. But at least should be enough so that you get the purpose to what's happening here. And also at the end of the day, you're going to want to check this in color too, because it still has to work in color. Even though you may think it's right in black and white, it may not be. So don't be afraid to fix it later on. That looks pretty good. Let's check this. All right, so overall, it's looking pretty good. I'm going to fix maybe just a couple more of these larger areas. Again, sometimes these transitions you just can't quite see as well when you're close. But we still want to have a little bit of shape and everything to the skin. That's kind of where the difficult threshold comes into play, is you tend to end up doing this in the beginning, flattening out everything, when you actually still want to try to maintain the three-dimensionality of the skin by the time it's all said and done. You can see there's definitely shadow here, even though we've fixed a lot of these problem areas. So again, pretty exaggerated so far. The skin looks much better. And I'm going to turn these two temporary layers off, and we can see it before and after. And all the texture is still there. It all looks really nice. And again, you may say, hey, I think this is too polished, too over the top. That's fine. I'm going to group it together with a Command G on the Mac or Control G on the Mac. And if you want to just dial the opacity down, you can slowly blend that back entirely up to the threshold that you want. Okay? Or if you want to go the full Monty on it, you can as well. It is entirely up to you. Now, you'd also want to make sure that the skin doesn't feel overly done compared to the body. We're only focusing on the body, on the face for this particular image. So you want to make sure that it doesn't look very strange, because the face has a lot of retouching, and if you have parts of the body in it, that it too matches. So you want it to feel the same. You don't have to go to this level, but you tend to want to at least get it relatively close. So here is the before and after. One more time. And I think we've got a nice, thorough amount of skin local dodging and burning here. To give you an idea as far as what the actual masks look like, because I think this is kind of fascinating, I'm going to option click. Alt click on the PC, option click on the Mac, on the mask, and you can kind of see what's actually happening here. So this is my lighten mask, and this is my darken mask. You can see that I do have a fair amount more on lighten, even though I do have some on darken. So it's lots of little adjustments which all add together to make the big change. And you can see how drastic this can be, and how great of a job that local dodging and burning can do to make the skin look better. Again, this is about threshold. I'm not saying this is the absolute amount that you should do, but you can always dial this back. I always find it's good to go to the end, and you can always dial it back versus not doing enough. And so have that as part of your workflow, local dodging and burning, and there you go. Hope you've enjoyed it. My name is Chris Knight. You can see more of my work at chrisknightphoto.com. Also, check out my recent book, The Dramatic Portrait, available on Amazon.com.